Welcome to the Smart Weight Loss Coaching Podcast. I'm Dr. Lisa Oldson, a board-certified weight loss medicine specialist and certified life coach. In this podcast, I'll share fresh insights and effective techniques for incorporating mindset, habit change, and proven science into your life. Are you ready to achieve sustainable weight loss, wellness, and longevity? Then let's jump in and lose weight the smart way. Welcome back. Today's episode is one that I've been looking forward to recording because we're going to bust one of the most persistent myths I hear from people I work with. People often tell me something like, I don't eat nuts because they're fattening. If you've been thinking that too, we need to talk. I hear this all the time. Someone will tell me their weight loss is going well, they're making good choices, and then almost apologetically they'll add, I know I shouldn't, but I had a handful of almonds. And I think, why do we need to feel guilty about one of the most nutritious, satisfying, heart-healthy foods on the planet? Today, I want to give you full permission, backed by serious research, to enjoy nuts. Because the science on this is actually quite clear, and it points in a direction that might surprise you. Let's start with why people are so afraid of nuts. If you're allergic to them, then of course you should be afraid. I'm with you on that. But even if you're not allergic, it's not entirely irrational to be a bit hesitant about eating nuts. Look at the back of an almond package. About 160 calories per ounce. And around 14 grams of fat. For someone who's been told their whole life that fat makes you fat, I'm putting that in air quotes, and that calories are the be-all and end-all, that looks a bit scary. The issue is that fear of certain foods, like nuts, has real consequences. When I work with clients, I find that the foods they've eliminated out of fear are often the very foods that would help them, and nuts fall squarely into that category. The assumption goes like this. Nuts are calorie dense. Therefore, eating nuts will cause weight gain. It sounds logical, but the research tells a very different story. And today, we're going to walk through that story together. Let's start with a large, well-designed study, the Nurses' Health Study 2, which followed over 50,000 women for 8 years and looked at the relationship between nut consumption and weight change. Women who ate nuts 2 or more times per week had slightly less weight gain over those 8 years than women who rarely ate nuts. And those results held whether the women were normal weight, overweight, or had obesity going into the study. 2 or more servings of nuts per week led to slightly less weight gain than average. Not more, less. That finding's been replicated many times. A 2018 meta-analysis in the journal Nutrition and Metabolism pooled data from 6 large prospective cohort studies involving over 42,000 participants, along with 62 randomized controlled trials. The cohort studies found that each additional serving of nuts per week was associated with a small but meaningful reduction in the risk of overweight or obesity. And when they looked at the randomized trials, nut consumption was associated with modest reductions in body weight, body mass index, and waist circumference. And a 2021 systematic review and meta-analysis, one I want to highlight specifically, published in the journal Obesity Review, looked at all the evidence on nuts and adiposity. Adipose tissue is fat tissue. So looking at adiposity basically means we're looking at the relationships between nuts and body fat. It pulled in data from 6 prospective cohort studies and 86 randomized controlled trials. 86! That's a lot. And this particular meta-analysis found that nut consumption did not increase the risk of overweight or obesity. The long-term cohort data actually showed an inverse association. People who eat more nuts tend to weigh less over time. So that's the consistent message across the literature. More nuts does not equal more weight. In fact, it might mean less. This is where the science gets a little surprising. There are actually several biological reasons why nuts, despite their calorie count, don't translate into weight gain the way you might expect. First, the calories on the package may be overstated. I know you might be skeptical to hear that, but bear with me. Nuts have a very unique physical structure. Their fat is stored inside intact plant cells with walls made of tough fiber. Those cell walls resist our digestive enzymes. So when you eat a whole almond, a portion of the fat stays trapped inside those cells and passes right through your digestive system without being absorbed. Research from the USDA has shown that the actual energy, or the calorie count, that we can access from almonds is about 25 to 32% lower than what the label says. For walnuts and pistachios, the number is lower too, somewhere between 5 and 21% fewer calories actually absorbed. The bottom line, you're absorbing fewer calories from nuts than the label tells you. That 160 calorie ounce of almonds, your body may only actually absorb and use around 120 of those calories. The second reason nuts don't cause weight gain is that nuts are deeply satisfying. They're rich in protein and fiber, two nutrients we know drive satiety or fullness. When you eat a handful of almonds before lunch, you're likely to eat less of your meal, which is probably a good thing if your meal looks like the typical American lunch. Several studies have shown that people don't fully compensate for the calories in nuts by eating more elsewhere. There's something about that combination of fat, protein, and fiber that sends genuine fullness signals to your brain. Keep in mind, this is the opposite of what happens when we eat ultra-processed foods. Those foods, which are typically bankrupt when it comes to fiber, leave us feeling hungrier. So if you eat 160 calories of chips compared to 160 calories of nuts, I promise that you'll be much hungrier much sooner after the chips. The third reason that nuts don't cause weight gain is that the type of fat found in nuts, primarily mono and polyunsaturated fat, is more readily burned for energy than saturated fat and has a somewhat higher thermogenic effect. Let's talk about that, the thermogenic effect. That means your body actually works harder to process it. I imagine this is like putting something on a fire in the fireplace. If you throw a crumpled up piece of newspaper into the fire, it will burn up easily in a hot second. That's the chips, easily digested with very little effort. If you put a log onto the fire, that takes a lot more time and effort, more energy for the fire to break it down. In our bodies, certain foods take more energy to digest. We burn more calories when we eat and digest them. Nuts are that way. You can imagine the difference between eating a handful of almonds compared to a handful of Cheetos, just to be a little dramatic with my example. The Cheetos practically melt. You barely have to chew, so there's no effort and very little thermogenic impact of eating Cheetos. They pass through and are absorbed super quickly and easily. The handful of almonds? That's a fair amount of work. Harder to chew, harder to move along, harder to digest. So we burn a lot of calories in the process. Put those three factors together, lower calorie absorption, higher satiety or fullness, and favorable fat metabolism, and you start to understand why the data consistently shows that nuts don't cause weight gain and may actually help with weight control. The heart health story is exceptionally interesting. But before we talk about the impact of nuts on heart health, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor. Just kidding. It's still me, Dr. Lisa Oldson, physician and founder of Smart Weight Loss Coaching. If you're as focused on your health as you are on the scale, you're my person. In my online program, we'll help you establish healthy habits for weight loss, better health, and longevity. If you'd like to learn more about our affordable monthly membership, head over to smartweightlosscoaching.com. We would love to help you transform the way you approach weight loss so it takes up less brain space and frees up your time for other things you love to do. Join us to see how different a smart weight loss program can be. And we're back. Now let's talk about the heart health evidence, because this is where the research on nuts is truly remarkable. First of all, I want you to keep in mind that the majority of us will die from cardiovascular disease. Not cancer, not infections, not autoimmune diseases, cardiovascular diseases like heart disease and stroke. And keep in mind also that the time to protect yourself from heart problems and strokes starts now. Not when you're 80, not when you're 70. Whatever age you're at right now, you should start today, which is why I want to share a very famous study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2013 and then republished with some revisions in 2018. This landmark study, which you may have heard of, is called the PREDIMED trial. PREDIMED looked at preventive health using a Mediterranean-style diet. This was a large randomized controlled trial that enrolled over 7,400 adults in Spain who are at high risk of cardiovascular disease. Participants were assigned to one of three groups: a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil, a Mediterranean diet supplemented with mixed nuts, especially almonds, walnuts, and hazelnuts, or a control group given advice on following a low-fat diet. Remarkably, the trial was stopped early at a follow-up of approximately 5 years because the Mediterranean diet groups were doing so much better that researchers felt it would be unethical to keep the control group on the lower-fat diet. Both Mediterranean diet groups saw roughly a 30% reduction in major cardiovascular events, heart attacks, strokes, and cardiovascular deaths compared to the control group. 30%. That is a staggering number. And the nut group achieved it without any calorie restriction, without any requirement to lose weight, and without any additional weight gain. In fact, a separate analysis showed the nut group saw nearly a 14% reduction in metabolic syndrome prevalence at 1 year, which was greater than the olive oil group and dramatically greater than the control group. I'll give it to you in simple terms. If you don't want to die from heart disease or a stroke, give serious thought to following a Mediterranean-style diet, preferably one with plenty of vegetables, fruits, fish, nuts, and also extra virgin olive oil. Then there's the Lyon Diet Heart Study, published in the journal Circulation. This was a secondary prevention trial, meaning participants had already had one heart attack. They were randomized to either a Mediterranean-style diet or a more conventional low-fat diet. After a mean follow-up of nearly 4 years, the Mediterranean diet group had a 50 to 70% lower risk of recurrent heart disease. The heart attack recurrence rate was cut by half or more. And as you know, the Mediterranean diet includes nuts as a central component. These aren't small observational studies. They're large, randomized controlled trials. And nuts, as part of an overall healthy dietary pattern, clearly protected the heart. What about nuts as part of a calorie-restricted diet for people trying to lose weight? I'm sure many of you are thinking about this. Can I really eat nuts and lose weight? The answer is yes, and here's the evidence. A 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis published in the journal Foods analyzed 16 randomized controlled trials that looked specifically at adding nuts in amounts ranging from about 1 to 3 ounces per day to calorie-restricted diets. The results? Adding nuts did not negatively affect weight loss, body mass index, waist circumference, or body composition. People in the nut group lost weight just as effectively as those in the comparison groups. And, importantly, the nut group saw improvements in cardiovascular risk markers that the comparison groups did not. There's also a compelling study published in the journal Obesity that looked at almonds, specifically within a low-calorie diet. Participants who added about 3 ounces of almonds daily to a calorie-restricted or low-calorie plan lost significantly more weight and had a lower body mass index than those following the same calorie deficit, but eating carbohydrate-based snacks instead of nuts. The participants got about 15% of their calories from almonds, or in the other group, from oven-baked fruit cereal bars and rice crackers. The bars and rice crackers were chosen because they're popular snacks that are lower in the beneficial nutrients found in almonds, but they provide similar calories. The results showed an 18% body weight reduction with almonds versus 11% without. The almond group also saw greater reductions in fat mass and waist circumference. So yes, if you're trying to lose weight and if you're trying to improve your heart health, lower your risk of stroke and metabolic disease in the future, nuts can absolutely be part of your plan, especially if the nuts are replacing less healthy carb-filled snacks. The evidence supports that. Let me give you some practical guidance you can start using today. A standard serving of nuts is about 1 ounce, which is roughly a small handful. For almonds, that's about 23 nuts. For walnuts, it's about 14 halves. For pistachios, about 49 kernels. I found these numbers online, meaning I think it's a pretty large man with big hands who can hold 49 kernels of pistachios in one hand. For me, a handful would be less. So please don't count your almonds. That's just way over the top. If you're doing that, I think your diet is taking up too much brain space. But I do like the idea of grabbing a handful, putting it in a little dish, and putting away the bag so you're willing to stop at 1 handful. That should be plenty. Also, variety is great. Walnuts are particularly high in omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, magnesium, and lots of valuable micronutrients. Almonds are high in antioxidants, vitamin E, magnesium, and calcium. Pistachios offer a good amount of potassium along with their antioxidants, and Brazil nuts are one of the best dietary sources of selenium. Mixing it up gives you a wider range of nutrients. Whole, raw, or dry roasted nuts are your best bet. Once you get into those highly salted, oil or chocolate-coated nuts or heavily processed forms, you're adding things we want to limit. The simpler, the better. Nuts make a fantastic snack between meals. They're delicious on yogurt or a quick handful before a workout. They travel well, require no refrigeration, and they're genuinely convenient. Also, as I learned when I was traveling to New York last weekend, they're easy to find at the airport when your flight is delayed and you've run out of food. If you've been avoiding nuts because you thought they'd make you gain weight, I hope you've let that go today based on the research, because nuts are not fattening and they don't cause weight gain. And the data consistently suggests that people who eat nuts regularly tend to weigh less and they're healthier over time. Okay, my friends, it's time for your NBA, your next best action for today. I think it's pretty obvious that it's time to take care of yourselves and go have a handful of nuts. You're welcome. Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like more support during your smart weight loss journey, check out our group coaching program at smartweightlosscoaching.com. Until next time, stay well and stay smart.